Thank you for joining me. Thanks, Redshirt, for being in the chat already. I thought I would take the opportunity to just play about with my live streaming, StreamYards, all the gear, and given the news today that of the sad passing of yet another 60s icon, Mr. Mike Nesmith, I thought it would be appropriate to have at least a very short live stream where I could pay tribute to the man, talk a little bit about my experience with the Monkees, and just generally celebrate the life of someone who's like one of these guys. It's always been around in my life. And the show, being born in the early 60s, the show was on when I was very young, and obviously being a kid, and it was aimed at a family audience and kids. Let's make no bones about the Monkees. It wasn't intended to be some hard-hitting expose. It was like the Marx Brothers meets the Beatles kind of show, zany, wacky, with a lot of fantastic tunes. So I literally grew up watching that show and the reruns of that show throughout the 70s, and absolutely adored it from the time I was a little kid, and also that music. So, like the Beatles and the other music of that era, that was what was on the radio when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and then older. That was what was on Top of the Pops, the UK chart show. These songs are kind of soaked into your being as a result, soaked into the fabric of your life. So, and in fact, I'm a Believer was the first 7-inch single that I owned in my life. And I didn't buy it with my own money. I was just a kid. I was only about 6, 7 years old, but somebody bought it for me. I think it was my older brother or older sister, and I absolutely adored that record. Now, early Monkees tracks, the guys themselves didn't necessarily play on those. They all sang, of course. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go on, but they've, from that perspective, they hold a very dear place in my heart for my life. And I'm a pretty egalitarian guy. I'm not a music snob per se. There's a lot of things I draw the line at, and I'm not particularly keen on listening to. But I was never, hard rock and guitar-based rock's always been my driving primary force. I've got every other kind of genre you can imagine, and I've always had a huge love of good pop music, well written, well played, well sung, and particularly jangly guitar pop, which obviously songs like Last Train to Clarksville are very, very much based along that jangly power pop model, So, and indeed, New Bomb Turk, thank you for joining me, and Wookiee Supremacy, thanks very much for being in this chat for one of my very, very, very first live streams. And yeah, they did play in the later albums. They were the puppets cut their strings. They revolted to the record company head and the studio head. They actually played a live gig in private for the TV head of the TV production company, and convinced them that they needed to be allowed to do their own thing. So, but just to return to Mr. Nesmith. So, Monkee singer and guitarist Mike Nesmith dies from natural causes at home in LA, age 78. Mike had a quadruple bypass a couple of years ago, I believe. And indeed, when you see pictures, as we'll look at a couple later on of him performing with Mickey, he certainly looks his age, and not necessarily looking the most robust of guys. So he was lucky enough to pass at home quietly with his family around him. He had certainly had a long-term partner and children, many children, I suspect grandchildren. And he was instrumental in driving for the Monkees to have more control, the guys to have more control over their own records, to be able to write the songs, play on them, sing them, and produce them, and so on. So his family announced his passing in a statement reading, "With infinite love, we announce that Michael Nesmith has passed away this morning in his home, surrounded by family, peacefully, of natural causes." Cause of death being announced as heart failure. So there's 3 of the guys gone. Davy Jones, who was very young when he died. More recently, Peter Tork. That leaves Mickey Nolans as the remaining member. Now, I was lucky enough, jumping ahead a little, in 1996 to see the Monkees on a reunion tour in the UK, and it was all 4 of the guys. Now, that wasn't something that happened too often. It certainly did happen a few times. All 4 of them were there, and it was just a fantastic show. It was a lot of fun. All the hits were played. They did some of their own solo material. They all had their own little solo bits. They did the walk with the 4 of them in step. The banter was good, and they all played, and they were fantastic. And it was just a great fun night, and that's sometimes what we want out of our music. We don't want it all to be, deadly serious, I'm an artist, grungy, life is horrible, miserable. They were a fun band. They had a lot of fun songs, and that really came to the fore in the show with their performances and on their records and live. So Mickey is the last, and it's a sad time. So the Monkees once rivaled the Beatles with their consecutive hits, as Nesmith tried to get them to be a real band and not just one that was made for television. And indeed, the hits were substantial, and as I say, the soundtrack of my life as a young man. So his mother, and Mike was in a lucky position in many ways, unlike many struggling musicians, and his mum had made a fortune out of inventing whiteout. So he was able to pursue his dreams, which were career in music. And the Monkees was an interesting concept, trying to make a TV show out of a pop band with a kind of a Beatley feel to it. They all had their own personalities assigned in terms of the script. But when you see who some of the guys were that actually auditioned for the Monkees, you had a certain Mr. Charles Manson, who was on the music scene, particularly connected to Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys and some others. And Stephen Stills auditioned, obviously later of Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. There was a lot of interest in this because a lot of guys wanted to make it in TV or in films, and a lot of those guys were musicians. And Davy and Mickey had both had backgrounds. So when they say, "Oh, none of them were music guys," well, this is just not true. Davy had been on the stage in London and on Broadway in musicals. He could sing. He could also play keyboards and guitar, as he did live in later years. Mickey was a singer, could also play the guitar, etc. Actually couldn't play the drums, although he was assigned the role of the drummer, obviously, in the show, so he had to learn, but became an accomplished drummer and multi-instrumentalist himself. Brilliant singer. Listen to that vocal on "I'm a Believer" is just absolutely tremendous. Great Neil Diamond song. Peter Tork, multi-instrumentalist again, had always been into music and been in multiple bands, and particularly on the folk scene. If you look up on YouTube the Beatles TV special they did, the Beatles, the Monkees, getting confused. I'm old, because we're going to talk about the Beatles in a few minutes. So when you look at the Monkees TV special, there's a great clip at the end where Peter Tork sits down in front of an electric piano and plays a classical piece. And I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. and it's just brilliant. And then there are other YouTube videos of him playing church organs. He was a fantastic keyboard player. And Mike, of course, was a great guitarist, songwriter, and later on became a really good producer. And then we'll talk about the video stuff too. So he, they were all connected to music. And yes, this was an acting gig, but the show itself, whilst it was zany, and it was kind of a Marx Brother slapstick routine a lot of the times, really was charming, and it attracted a lot of great guests. Even Frank Zappa was on the show, and this is the kind of guys that were hanging around in that scene. And I think looking back, there might be some when rock became heavier, there might have been some snobbery about the Monkees and their fact that it was created for TV initially, but I don't think that existed at the time. So a great example of that would be and by the way, if hopefully everybody can hear me okay, because as I say, I'm just getting into this live streaming thing and going to get the balance right. So let me know if you can't hear me okay. And I'd like to say hail to Zax, Sherry, thanks for being here. Newborn Turk, just another red shirt. Anyone else I've missed? Thank you all for being here. So the Beatles, who obviously many saw the Monkees as a sort of pop rival to them in the charts, they were a very, very egalitarian bunch of guys too. They did not discriminate. They weren't snobs, musically or in any other way. And these pictures, that picture that's on the screen right now, that was actually taken at the recording of A Day in the Life, when there was a bunch of people were invited by the Beatles to the studio. Some of the Stones are there, Marianne Faithfull, various other people. But the Monkees were there in the studio. And you see lots of great pictures of them hanging out, and they hung out several times in the years after that. But yeah, they were there. If you look at that footage of A Day in the Life, which was taken on a color 8mm camera, silent footage, but it's been married to the music, you'll see them there hanging out, and they all got on extremely well, apparently. So just to go back to Mike, he survived by 3 children, and from his first marriage, another son from his second relationship, and 2 grandchildren. And there you see him pictured last month. I think this is the last gig he did with Mickey. And they've been apart from COVID stopping them, were fairly consistent in the last few years of working together. And then that fantastic picture of them there. Just such a great look there. Yeah, there they are, the two of them. And you can see that obviously Mike's gone through a few, he went through his heart issues and lost a lot of weight, etc. But smiling away there, nice to see that. And then this is really quite a heartbreaking picture of the two of them hugging each other. And despite, many years of the 4 of them falling in and out, as bands tend to do, I think they forged a real relationship in the latter years, and these 2 guys absolutely did love each other. So lovely to see that. And Mickey did put out a fantastic statement and tweet. So it talks a little bit about in this article about Mike's post-Monkees work with the First National Band. He was a great songwriter. He wrote Different Drum, which the Stone Ponies and others covered successfully. Linda Ronstadt, of course, the Stone Ponies. Listen to the Band, which is a fantastic record. And really was a country rock pioneer. I know he was certainly connected to and knew Graham Parsons and the Flying Burrito Brothers, and I think a lot of the stuff that they did was simpatico with what Mike was doing in the country rock field. Not necessarily that they were heavily influenced by him, but they were certainly doing pioneering work in that area, and this is well pre-Eagles, etc. Of course, Flying Burrito Brothers had Graham Parsons, but also Bernie Leadon, who went on to be a founding member of the Eagles. So he was right in at the core of that group of people, along with the Byrds and others, that were creating this country rock sound. Mickey's tweet there. I'm heartbroken. I've lost a dear friend and partner. I'm so grateful that we could spend the last couple of months together doing what we loved best, singing, laughing, and doing shtick. I'll miss it all so much, especially the shtick. Rest in peace, Nez, all my love, Mickey. And indeed, when I saw them live, there was a lot of shtick. It was fun. So I don't want to dwell too much upon the article, as it were. He certainly carved out a distinctive look in the show with the green woolly hat. He was seen as the serious one, and I think it did, to a certain extent, mirror his personality. He was a little bit more thoughtful than the others, a little bit more forward-looking, and he certainly a little more cynical, but not in a bad way, because it wasn't that kind of show. Very deadpan, and that came across well. But he also his warmth, and he was apparently an extremely warm, charming, nice guy. So, yeah, another great picture. I think that is from the set, because you'll see that, you recognize that if you watch the show. And the show stands up well. I mean, I know it's a little corny in places, but it really was good slapstick humor. Lightweight, obviously, because of the time of broadcast, and it was a family show, but there's a lot of fun in it, a lot of great musicals, really great songs, a lot of great guests. And then, of course, when they got to Control, they did do albums that they played on, recorded their own songs on, and then did the movie Head, which I've always been a fan of. A lot of people don't like that film, but I've thought it was brilliant. It was insane. It's actually co-written by Jack Nicholson, and just nuts. And the scene of them crawling out of Victor Mature's hair, etc. And it starts off with a fantastic Dolphin song, Dolphin tune, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. So, but yeah, great stuff, and all in a fantastically shot color. Just looked, it was one of the earliest major color shows. Looked absolutely fantastic. So beyond that, after the first national band era, he also was a pioneer, as you all know, of video production, and a lot of his own hits, such as Rio. He pioneered, which is a great song as well, international hit for him. He pioneered the early video promotion. He did the Elephant Parts thing in 1981, which is really, really, really excellent show if you've ever seen it, or excellent collection. You think you could call it show of parts. And of course, he did the Pop Clips thing, which really became MTV. He pioneered that. He could see the future there and pioneered that. And we all love that, of course, for many years. MTV now, of course, doesn't do anything to do with music, and it's absolute crap. But for many years, that was a great move. And his Pacific Arts Company did an awful lot of production and distribution. So certainly not a one-note guy. And he continued to tour and record and toured with the other guys in various combinations over the years. So Mike Nesmith, yeah, wonderful guy. And the fact that, they were hanging out with guys like the Beatles says an awful lot for them. And I think it was mentioned the other day, before Mike passed, that we were talking on another show about one of the Monkees' major US tours that they were the headliners on, had a certain Jimi Hendrix as the support act, which lasted for about, 6 gigs before they decided that possibly it wasn't working. The Screaming Teeny Boppers were not quite into Hendrix per se. So anyway, it's a sad thing, These guys are slipping from us. And hey, Dildo, Sentient Dildo, nice to see you. I really do appreciate all you guys coming in here. I thought it was just great to mark the passing of this wonderful guy who gave us all this wonderful music with a little bit of a stream. As I say, lots of memories for me watching the show, listening to the records. the Monkees' greatest hits album, which I had on cassette in the 70s. The tape got worn out, worn thin. You couldn't play it anymore. It was so played. And, you know, as rock got heavier and pop music moved away and it split into really pop music, and then rock became two separate things. A lot of bands and artists would, you know, kind of poo-poo and look down on guys like the Monkees and say, well, that's just pop crap. But I absolutely don't believe that at all. Apart from the talents of the guys themselves, they are fantastic songwriters, voice and heart. Neil Diamond, you know, Carole King, people like that. All those guys were picking up songs from a lot of those guys. It was a fantastic show for songwriters to get their songs on there. And then they started to write their own material. Circle Skies, and one of my particular favorites. It's a Mike Nesmith, more rock track. And listen to the band, which was done in a couple of different versions. There's a slightly more bombastic one, which became more like the official Monkees release, but then there's the beautiful country rock one that Mike preferred, that version of the track. Great stuff. So there it was. Oh, Dildo's been dipping his toe in the Twitter filth. Don't want to hear that. You don't dip your toe in any filth, Dildo. Yeah. This is actually really another really great picture. I'll just call it up briefly, which is of John and Mike again at the Day in the Life sessions. Fantastic. Imagine he went from living in his car with his wife, struggling to make a living in Hollywood. And a year later, he's in the studio with the Beatles, sitting with John, watching them do A Day in the Life. I think it's pretty good. Pretty good change to make, you know. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm glad you don't, Dildo. That's you don't want to be dipping your toe in anything. You can dip other things, but not your toe. And you certainly don't want Bree's toes dipping in anything. So yeah, Mickey's the only one left, and we're down to two Beatles, two members of the Who. We lost Charlie Watts earlier, not that long ago this year. Another guy that died, which I of a band that many of you may not have heard of, is a British band called Status Quo, who were around from the 60s, had hits in the early 60s, Pictures of Matchstick Men, but then reinvented themselves in the 70s as a hard rock, denim-clad hard rock boogie band. Their bass player, longtime bass player Alan Lancaster, died this year, which I'm very sad about, because they were, again, a beloved band for me, and certainly in their 70s hard rock days. Hey, we're all getting old, so and it's funny, I was actually working hard this morning. I did a Midnight's Edge in the background. I was working hard on producing a video, which hopefully will be out tomorrow, about this particular band, which is the Kinks. And this is a 1979 album they did called Low Budget, possibly one of the best albums recorded in the 70s. Obviously, another band I grew up listening to in their heyday. Reinvented themselves in the 70s as a more sort of arena rock band, and this Low Budget is one of the best albums ever made, in my opinion. I absolutely love it. So, good point there. So I was busy making that video, recording that, and trying to finesse that one, which is always tough when you're not actually allowed to play the bloody music. But and then I just noticed that someone mentioned in the chat on Midnight's Edge that, and it may have been one of you guys, that Mike Nesmith had died. So, oh my God, you know, went off and had a look at that. So yeah, New Bomb Turk made a good point that ironically, the invention of MTV, which was largely, or certainly seriously prompted by Mike Nesmith's work in that area with his pop clips, provided a resurgence of interest in the show, because MTV in its early days was a bit content light, so they showed the Monkees and clips of the Monkees, but also full episodes, and they got a whole new audience, which was it's always good when that happens, you know. I think if you wait long enough, even if you're unhip, as many people saw the Monkees as being throughout the 70s, when it got into the MTV era, they suddenly became hip again, and people forget all that prejudice and start loving it for what it is, which is great songs by great people. So I guess Mike contributed to the resurgence. Not sure he was always too happy about that, because sometimes he wasn't too keen to take part in the reunions. But as I say, I'm very lucky that I got to see him, and they were all enjoying themselves and having a good time and all playing great, and the crowd just absolutely loved it. But there's been a few acts that have kind of gone round in that circle. They've returned to relevance, and people have kind of overlooked what people said they didn't like about them before and come back to popularity. And I mean, the Monkees was made for TV. It was made for the visual medium. So to show them on MTV was perfect, absolutely perfect. Funnily enough, somebody mentioned the in the chat, and I'm just going to have a quick little look back. The Archies, yeah. So it's actually, funnily enough, it's kind of the other way around, as I understand it. So when the Monkees went to Bob Rafelson, who had set the whole thing up and hired them and got the show rolling and really controlled everything, eventually when they cut the strings from Rafelson and protested and got to record their own stuff and took more control of their career as a real band and cut those strings, he went off and made the Archies cartoon because he wanted total control. So a cartoon, no one's going to rebel. It's so therefore Sugar Sugar and so on, and that cartoon became a big hit. And I recall watching that cartoon, although I can't say I've seen many reruns of it over the years. I remember watching it in the late 60s, early 70s as a kid. Sugar Sugar was an enormous hit. I mean, couldn't get away from the bloody thing. And it's the sort of trivia that at one point I knew, and I'm just going to look it up, of who actually wrote that song. Oh yeah, now I remember why I know this. Jeff Barry and Andy Kim, who, Andy Kim, of course, is a Canadian guy from Montreal, and he had a bunch of hits on his own, like some hits like cover of Be My Baby, Baby I Love You, stuff like that. But he was one of the writers for the Archies. Yeah, it's all coming back to me now. So you can blame the Canadians for Sugar Sugar. Blame a Canadian. Rock Me Gently. That was another one of his. Although, yeah, he had a #1 hit in the US with that, Andy Kim. So he co-wrote Sugar Sugar. And again, these shows were, like the Monkees, were great showcase, a great storefront for these writers, because the other co-writer of that was Jeff Barry. And I mean, this is a guy that wrote stuff for the Monkees too, but he used to write with Ellie Greenwich and worked with Phil Spector. So Jeff Barry co-wrote stuff like Do a Diddy Diddy, Do a Ron Ron, and anything with the word do in it, basically. Do a Diddy Diddy, everything I do it for you, do dooby dooby do. Then I Kissed Me, Be My Baby. He co-wrote all of those. So the Archies may have been a cartoon, but I guess it had some high-powered people working on it. Don't know who actually worked on the music side of that in terms of recording who the musicians were, but it could have been anybody. Apparently Ray Stevens was on that. You remember Ray Stevens? Some of his records wouldn't get made now. Bridget the Midget being one. And then there's Ahab the Arab, and then there was some other even more ones that would be considered even more problematic now. The Streak, of course, was a huge hit, but Ray Stevens also wrote and recorded one of my all-time favorite songs, Misty, which is, if you've never heard it, it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful country record. But yeah, the Archies, my God, I hadn't thought about that one for a while. We can see if there's some clips on YouTube because I don't even recall who the voice actors were. But yeah, that was Bob Raffleson trying to get total control. So particularly as he wanted those records out there so he could get the money from producing those, So quite a sweet record, Sugar. But anyway, so that's half an hour. I only intended to do 10 minutes. So yeah, Wrecking Crew, you're right, Newbomb. I think a lot of those guys would have been in there because this was if Jeff Barry was involved, and he would have brought those Phil Spector related guys in there. Of course, the Wrecking Crew, that's a fantastic documentary about them. I'm sure you've all seen it, but when you look at the records they played on, the Beach Boys stuff, and just hundreds, if not thousands, of great 60s records. Glenn Campbell was one of the Wrecking Crew, of course, so one of my favorite artists as well, country artists, any artist. So yeah, it's such great music was being produced then. Even the pop music now, as I say, things divide into rock and pop, and the people started to go into their tribes. But the pop music of the time was just so rich. I mean, compared to now, and I know I'm doing that old man thing, but now with the sort of 100,000 tracks digitally produced, 6 producers make it all, same beat, same template, same formula. It just seemed so much more creative then and so much more fun. I mean, you can look at throw a dart in any top 40 in the UK or America in the mid to late 60s, and it'll just be chock full of superlative records. So you could have the Monkees, the Beach Boys, the Beatles, the Stones, Stevie Wonder, you name it, all in the top 10 at the same time. And yeah, almost like any other era that was crap, but there's always crap, but just this fountain of talent, and it was fun. It was a fun time. So music's awful serious now, but anyway, rest in peace, Mike Nesmith. Thank you for all the music, for all the laughs, for the concerts. I appreciated it throughout my life. I appreciated your songs. I still listen to them today, and I'll continue to listen to them in the future. Zax. As long as you didn't say the drummer from Strawberry Alarm Clock. Hooking up with his daughter's okay, but Mad Martigan would probably go in for the drummer, but unless the drummer was a woman, I assumed the gender of the drummer. Could have been a woman. I mean, look at the bass player on the Wrecking Crew, and God, my mind's just late at night. It's like midnight. I'm coming up for midnight. I'm knackered. Can't remember her name now. Great, brilliant bass player. Probably a great drummer too. But yeah, everything's processed now. Then they had to work at it to get it to sound good. And I certainly wanted to make a video about the Beatles and I was going to do a live stream on Get Back. I know a lot of people don't like the Beatles, and that's okay. And they don't like the songs; it's not their thing. I get that, but the one thing I can't deny is, as he says, wearing a Sergeant Pepper hat, is what they did with what they had to work with. So their first album, recorded in late 62, early 63, apart from Let Me Do, I think most of it was recorded in one 12-hour session, 2 tracks. That's it. The simplest of equipment. And this is an EMI Studio 2, top studio in the UK. 2 tracks is all they had to work with. So might sound primitive to some people today, but they had to work at it. And they came up with these fantastic things. They might have only 2 tracks or 4 tracks, but bands then could still get this brilliant sound. And you look at what Sam Phillips did with Elvis. even worse than that. Like one track, basically, one tape, one track, 3 guys standing in a room the size of this bedroom, and 3 mics. And yet it sounds brilliant. You listen to Mystery Train or That's All Right Mama, some of those note ones, early Elvis songs without the drummer. Just incredible sound. Just yeah, the Beatles and George Martin, they created rock recording and the rock album as we know it today. So whether someone likes them or not, I hate when people say, "Oh, they were rubbish." Well, they weren't rubbish. Everything that's done since is on the backs of that, and the backs of these bands in that time, the Beatles particularly. And I know I've plugged it a number of times on streams, but this book, the complete Beatles recording sessions by Mark Lewison, he's been heavily involved with the Beatles since Anthology. He's like the guy for knowing everything about the Beatles, and he's written a number of books. This one, it's a day-by-day breakdown of the recording sessions, everything they did, everything they played, how they did it, how they taped it, how they recorded it, how they produced it. And that sounds really dry. It's like reading a detective novel unfolding. And you say, well, okay, here they get to this track. How did they, oh, okay, we're going to try this, we're going to do that. And you see it unfolding throughout their career, like double tracking or flanging, as they called it. It was John Lennon came up with the term flanging. They got tired of having to double track their vocal. So they'd sing the song and then they'd add that extra thing that you hear. They'd sing it again on top of that and tape it on top of it. So it was them singing their own vocal twice, double tracking. So John got so fed up with that, he said to George Martin and Jeff Emerick and the others in the city, can you come up with a box that will do this? So they went away, came up with this box, and he only had to do it once. And the flanger, and John says, it's great, flange it. Just to convert this term. Things like that. Yeah, I mean, Sentient, nobody, you don't have to like them or the songs. I mean, in fact, I know a lot of people have never been that keen on them because they prefer more, R&B, or they'll prefer, modern rock or whatever. It could be in the rap now, or there's a million genres, and I get that. But I'm going to take this off the screen. Hang on. But yeah, just from a purely historical perspective, there was a lot of things that they did that now have led to where we are today, So I'd always like to see them get credit for that. But yeah, I mean, and it's not they didn't have their bum songs. I mean, there was quite a few in there that were just thrown off because they had to fill up an album. But then again, they were recording 2 albums and 5 singles in a year as well as touring. So the pressure they were under was incredible. So but yeah, even guys like the Monkees, you listen to those records with your headphones on, the production is just phenomenal. And the quality of the playing, again, a lot of it might have been the Wrecking Crew guys too, on the earlier stuff, till they started playing their own stuff. It's just the quality is just great. And all they had was 4 tracks, So, Paperback Writer. And the bass on that, on Paperback Writers, just kicks ass. It's just phenomenal. Great riff as well. But, yeah, I could talk about that all night, and probably I'll do a Get Back live stream and talk a little bit more about that, because Get Back is I watched it, and I've obviously seen Let It Be a number of times over the years. So Get Back, only a hardcore fan could watch the whole thing. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of stuff in there that if you didn't like the Beatles, you'd like them even less, because it's just like 9 hours or whatever. If you just skipped all that and watched the Rooftop gig, you see just what a great, tight little rock and roll band they were. And Paul's playing the bass and they're all singing together. It's just, phenomenal. But yeah, some of the other stuff drags a bit. Or Rain. Rain is your new one you've hit on. Could be my favorite Beatles track. It's changes a lot, but just the backwards stuff they did on that, which again it was revolutionary. But that bass riff is just kicks ass. And then those guitars, those jangly, I love that jangly guitar sound, the sound that launched a thousand power pop bands and 1,070s bands. You wouldn't have a big star if you didn't have the Beatles, or you wouldn't have some of the punk bands later, like the Jam. Just that jangly Rickenbackery sound, just love it to death. So anyway, I appreciate you guys joining me. It's I don't think I've done the odd few minutes here and there, but that's 40 minutes of live stream. Feeling quite good about it. I could probably talk longer, but I'm going to go to bed. So pop pickers, y'all, it's time for y'all to switch the radio off. Get your heads down. Get tucked in. So one last thanks, Mike Nesmith. May you rest in peace. Glad that your family were there with you and it was peaceful, and great job, sir. You had a great life and you provided a lot of pleasure to a lot of people. So well done. You can't ask for more than that. A life well lived. So well done. So thanks, guys. I'm sure I will see you all on the interwebs tomorrow somewhere. I appreciate you all for joining. Catch up with you later. Have a great night and keep on rocking.